Hello and welcome to part 3 of my attempt to find Dad's greatest rock album. At which stage, I'm forced to ask,
is there anybody out there?
Well, I hope so. Remember, we're marking every song on every album so we can find their best. Now, this one should be interesting. Pink Floyd are a psychedelic turned prog rock band who produced a fair amount of instrumental work, which should perhaps make them more amenable to classical ears. Let's find that out. And let's also see how well the Floyd, who I adored as a youth, have aged. Which means, in last place, I didn't like this album when I was young, but with older and wiser ears, it still sounds crap. It's a double album, one half boring live stuff and the other boring studio stuff. Great if you think 2 turds are better than 1 turd. I'd say a great cure for narcolepsy, only it's noisy as well as boring. In fact, you know what? In keeping with tradition, this album is getting an angry no marks. Next. Well, if you have to credit Ummagumma with one thing, it's pushing the film soundtrack album off last place, because that's happened in both of my last outings. But here we are with the film soundtrack in second last place, and the soundtrack for Babette Schroeder's rather obscure film La Vallée. Can I point out that Pink Floyd, and in particular I think Roger Waters, turned down Stanley Kubrick's request to use their music for Clockwork Orange, barely a year before they accepted this one. Great creative film choices, Pink Floyd. Next. It's Pink Floyd's second album, and if it were a Friends episode, it'd be the one where Syd leaves at the beginning.
Wow.
Syd Barrett, creatively the heart of Pink Floyd's first album, basically went mad and had left the band by the time of this second album. I say left the band, he'd been behaving increasingly erratically for quite a while and had stopped turning up for concerts even, and then the band eventually just didn't pick him up once, and that was the end of it. Until he turns up again, but that's the story of a later album coming up soon. This album, I'm afraid, feels like it has the ghost of Syd hanging over it, or perhaps I should call it the lack of Syd, his absence replaced by long moments of psychedelic boringness. We need some improvements, Pink Floyd, but oh dear, next. More bleeding film soundtracks. Sorry, I'm moving on right away. Come on.
On the wings of the night.
This is the album after Pink Floyd lose Roger Waters, who, despite being, I'm afraid, a bit of a tool, was basically the lyricist and increasingly the creative hub of the band. To misquote Jane Austen, to lose one creative member of your band is unfortunate, but to lose 2? Without Waters, Pink Floyd, to my ears, become a studio identikit version of themselves, so this is the last album of theirs I'm marking. The album's fine and everything, but creatively, everything just feels like it's on repeat. Hopefully things are going to get better. Okay, this feels like the first album with some proper creative oomph behind it. By no means a perfect album. For a start, is it just me, or is the mix really smudgy and dark and... Not just the brass band stuff. I know they had problems recording that in the studio, but how about this bit with Rick Wright? Sorry, Rick, what was that? Something about a smile? Oh, never mind. It's a starting to happen album, this one. Feels like the first time the band is really finding its feet after losing Syd Barrett. Yes, looking at that whole side one, they're connecting longer sections of instrumental and music more successfully together. So, good news. These albums are finally starting to sound good. Mix accepted on this album. So, what's next? There's something key to Pink Floyd's success that's also their greatest weakness, and that's their ability to go a long, long way with very little material. You can see that clearly on a track like One of These Days, which is musically incredibly repetitive, and yet it sounds like the way music is heading. Yes, Pink Floyd can stretch things out, but they discover fascinating sound fabrics in that repetition, and the effect can be thrilling rather than boring when it works. Good solid album this, but next comes...
And no one kills the children anymore.
This is really more of a Roger Waters album than a Pink Floyd one, and I have to admit, I've gone through the rounds on this one. I was a huge Pink Floyd fan when the album came out. I'd just recently gone through puberty and I thought War was really bad and, could be solved by a song. And also, like any other 80s kid, I loved a good sax solo. So this album was absolute catnip to me. However, I aged, graduated and started to find Roger Waters' trite moralising rather teenage and adolescent.
Oi, Roger, what's wrong?
Unless of course it's War in Your Own Band. The Friends version of this album would be the one where Rick left. Rick Wright, the keyboardist, chafing under Roger Waters' increasing dictatorial control of the band. So now I'm older, and a lot older, I do still hear the cringy moralising, but I've got to say, it's not a bad album to hear all these years later. Well made, and occasionally actually moving. But at number 5, we have Welcome to Great Britain, the only country that can rock out to an album about class structure. Yes, the pigs are at the top, the rulers, a middle class of dogs, and the sheep, the working class at the bottom. Welcome to George Orwell for Dummies. Kind of morally simplistic, a la Roger Waters, but musically the album is highly effective. The usual Pink Floyd trick of stretching a little a long way. Plus, it contains what my old school friend said was literally the most orgasmic piece of music he knew. Okay, enough of that. Next up.
Is there anybody out there?
Rather surprised this pipped Animals, as I prefer Animals as an album, but the numbers say what the numbers say, and in any case, the numbers are rather close. The Wall is the final cut on steroids for me. I loved this album when it came out when I was young. My parents actually took me to the live concert aged 13, which absolutely blew me away. I ended up doing an English project on the album at school, so coming back to it all these years later, it's the same Roger Waters effect. High marks for creative effort, but my, how adolescent and cringy a lot of the emotionality feels. It's a shame, really, there wasn't someone with a little more emotional and intellectual gravitas rather than Roger Waters to have led the band creatively. Okay, top 3, excited rubbing of hands. It's Pink Floyd's first album and it still sounds fresh and batty after all these years. A really great album. There's a whole Syd Barrett inspired lunacy about countryside scarecrows and gnomes named Grimble. I think they recorded this downtime at Abbey Road Studios in 1967 while the Beatles were recording Sgt. Pepper's. And I believe that Sir Paul McCartney himself in particular was very interested in the goings on downstairs with Pink Floyd. Was this the music of the future?
It's just the kind of girl to break my heart in two.
So, great first album for a band. Then Syd Barrett becomes a laughing Mad Hatter. How appropriate that that ghost makes a reappearance on Pink Floyd's next album on my list. Yes, in a way Syd Barrett's ghost haunts this album. Shine on You Crazy Diamond is about Syd Barrett, and so perhaps is Wish You Were Here. Irony of ironies, he had actually turned up to the recording session of this very album, and nobody in the band had realised that the fat bloke in the corner clutching a plastic bag was Syd Barrett until it was pointed out. But back to the album itself, the production of sound is meticulous, and through headphones all these years later, it still sounds absolutely fantastic. There's a landscape to the sound of the album, and it's rare that pop or rock music can claim to do that. Pink Floyd is still stretching out that material, 3 chords in 10 minutes kind of thing, but doing it so well that 10 minutes goes by really quickly, just the way it can in classical music. If half the album is Syd Barrett's Ghost, the other, Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar, throws a critical eye at the record industry, and that's usually a sign that a band is winding up creatively, grumbling about contracts and money and studios and whatnot. But Wish You Were Here remains, after all these years, a really great album, surpassed only by the even greater
Taking away the moments that make up a dull day.
I think just about everything fell in perfect place for Pink Floyd on this album. The lyrics are good from Roger Waters, and that stuff I thought was pretentious 30 years ago. You know, lines about time and ageing and whatnot. Honestly, today, lyrics like this come as a pleasant relief from the banality of most modern lyrics. The balance on the album here is just perfect from all the band members. Everyone is contributing. It's aged really well. It sounds beautiful. A really accomplished piece of work, and no surprise it came in first. And the marking system just gives one chance to look over the whole career of Pink Floyd and see how it developed, which was a really good start with Syd Barrett, him leaving and the band taking some time to recover, getting better and better, increasingly hitting that peak with Dark Side of the Moon, and then in decline after that. Great stuff mathematically. I hope you appreciate it. Okay, that's it. David Bowie next. This is me out.
We hope you have enjoyed the show.
Rock on, dads.